stereotypes. 25% of misogyny memes displayed gender stereotypes. One of the finds of my thesis that is under construction is that one of the most prevalent intolerances in the Brazilian masculinist universe that I am examining is the objectification of woman's role. So this seems to me more like a reproduction of what actually occurs in our patriarchal and structurally misogynist society. But it also seems to me that this data end up to normalizing, I don't know, trivializing, I don't know, extremist discourses of this nature. Or rather, this trivialization of extremism could be the cause of this result, I don't know. And so thinking about the context of this trivialization of extremism and humor as a means of political expression, I have a question, which is perhaps two questions in one. That is, how does humor as a way of engaging in politics contribute to this trivialization of extremist content and the consequent lack of problematization of this type of content? And furthermore, how do you believe this could entice young people towards right-wing extremism? Okay, the second one, the second topic I would like to address is the far-right mobilization in digital subcultures and in mainstream subcultures. We know that the dark web is filled of with content from the far right and intolerant content and misogynist content. But as you mentioned in your presentation, far-right memes are often created in the fringe, at the fringe, but move to the mainstream. And I really have the perception that these groups kind of increasingly want to be seen and be considered legitimate in the public sphere, or that is kind of open internet. And I would like to hear more from you about a particular issue. I know that you told about this in the final minutes of your presentation, but how do far-right discourses changing according to the platform, considering the affordance, and how can this pose a challenge to the researchers and other individuals and groups engaging in preventing and countering violent extremism? Because I think this is really a huge problem, a huge challenge to research these groups. So finally, I'd like to provide a brief contextualization of Brazil regarding extremist content and social media platforms to address the epistemic crisis issues. We currently have a bill on the way called the Fake News Bill in Brazil, which aims to, or PL das Fake News in Portuguese, and which aims to hold platforms accountable for combating misinformation and the spread of hate speech. So obviously, this law would also act against extremism, extremist movements. However, as we are experiencing a very intense period of epistemic crisis in Brazil, in terms of widespread distrust in the validity of information, in the legitimacy of science and facts, and even questioning what is true or what is not true. And as we are experiencing this epistemic crisis, many people criticize this bill as a form of censorship or something similar. And how do you believe this epistemic crisis pose a challenge for combating online extremism? I think it is.
Thanks, Bruna, for these excellent questions. I hope I know that you're also very deep into this, it seems, and so I hope I can somehow contribute. For the humor question, I think we also need to understand, of course, this is not so new, the problem, and it didn't come also in the context of digital communication, but we had also looking back to the interwar period in Europe, but also beyond, when we see also how like fascist movements have been communicating back then, there was always a way of joking, of dehumiliating with humor, of irony. So this has always been kind of rhetorical way in mobilizing persons and people. So this is, I think, something that really is not, we wouldn't assume it's stereotypical, because we think that we have a very clear language. So we have also, like, of course, linguistic studies on the Third Reich, for example, where we see, okay, there's a own language being built, but in the context of the movement phase, so in context of opposition, this is especially something that humor always played a big role in far right movements, on, even though it was on a very yeah, in a very special way. So we see, if we would hear, like, also speeches back then, those speeches are like often held like in pubs and bars, and so there was a kind of yeah, like the people want to be entertained. I think this is also something that we have now and then, and this kind of entertainment, to mix it with political content, is something that works quite well, especially in the context of humiliating other people. So I think this is always where there's a kind of research tradition that is, I think, a bit overcome now, but that always thinks that humor is a very positive characteristic of people, that it opens you to new ideas, and that it lowers barriers between persons. And it's true, of course, but it's always, you know, like, this dark side is always in the center of humor, to always show humor has always the power to structurate relations between people. There are those people who love about someone, and there are people who are loved about. So there is a kind of power asymmetry in humor, and it has always been, back then especially, of course, the weapon of the weak, it was always called, like, a bit romanticizing. So political power could have been challenged through humor and so on, but it has always been a very a very potent way in communicating prejudices, so especially against Black people, against Jews, against Muslims. So there's always a very malign way of humor connected. So I think for arts, like the background, and I think in recent context, and especially now, where we see also, like, the more relevance of image or audiovisual based platforms, that we have a much more ambivalent form of communication. So you said it very rightly, like the trivialization also, like, of extremism, but we have principally, I think, also trivialization of politics. I think this fits very well into, like, an omnipresent trivialization of politics in the context of a mimification of politics, we could say it like this. So we see that political speeches, political discourse is really reduced to certain snippets that are being reproduced in social media formats, so in little TikToks and reels and so on, and or like the production of memes. So we see, like, a lot of speeches in Germany, but especially in the US, but also Brazil, of course, where some parts of public appearances, they are tailored for the reproduction of social media. I think this plays very much into a principle harmonization between different forms of trivialization of politics, of racism, of extremism, and I think we have this always also combined. And I think this is like the perfect storm in the way also, that this works quite well, because yeah, I think complex discussions on complex issues is yeah, more or less to yeah, disappearing in mainstream discourse. And I think this is also a trend where this kind of apathy and distrust is also coming from in certain contexts. So I think you named it, and you also very well explained this form of persuasion that humor has, and especially humor in memes. And so, yeah, I think this is something that is also very, very difficult to counter speech and counteract. So this stands for itself. You cannot counter meme in a way. I mean, you can, but it's always there. It is not a, it's not a action reaction relation between visual communication. It's different than the textual way of communicating. And this is why memes are so potent in a way, because they stand for themselves. They do not need explanations. And they can be read so differently. So one meme can, for 100 people, have 100 different meanings. And I think this is also something that dog whistling that is connected here, to speak on two different audiences with the same images, to say, and always the possibility to draw back on this position. It was just humor, and to others it's a very clear form of signaling certain forms of hate and extremism. The second question was was also very interesting to have this cross-media, cross-platform dynamics better understood. So yeah, we have the same actors, and we are at the moment we are working on a cross-platform analysis between Telegram, YouTube, and TikTok to see how differently these actors, if they have like different accounts on different platforms, communicate. So is there a kind of different way of recruiting, or of generally like of sentiments that change between, like, let's say, stronger moderated platforms and less moderated platforms? I think this is something we need we need much more research on. I think this is very difficult also to differentiate this. We also, you named like also like this dark social. This is sometimes we have, of course, limits on access to data, because we have a strong personalization of social media and public communication. So I know that in Brazil, I think a lot of communication goes through WhatsApp, political communication, and as we have it here in Telegram. But it's this is also like, it's a very small, or like a tiny way between private and public communication. I think this is also the strength for certain actors, that they do not, or that they try to blur the lines between what is private and what is public, and also like in presenting themselves as influencers. So being an authentic person, being having a community. So this is building like these parasocial relations is on the one hand public, but for others it can also be understood as private, as they think we are a kind of intimate community, and this is we also like a kind of family. And I think this contributes very much to very strong identities, also like in collective terms. And the third point you made, this is I know that you also had this this law in Brazil that also comes close to what we had here in Germany, also like the Network Enforcement Act, it was called. Now we have the DSA, the Digital Services Act in the European Union, that is trying to harmonize, or to make for the first time some rules, European rules for internet providers. This is now quite exciting period here, and I think Brazil has a very special context as well. You had quite intense years, I would carefully say, like in the last years, where of course you had political forces in power that would work on, or like would intensify this epistemic crisis, because I think this is also I would go so far to say, okay, the epistemic crisis is the condition where far-right actors can get influential, because if there is no clear factual way of distinguishing between what is right and what is wrong, and if everything is like under a fog of rumors, of different allegations and statements, and I think this is something that is where you can have like the most out of it if you disorient the people. And I think we are quite advanced in this process of this epistemological crisis. I know that it's much worse in US and in Brazil than it is probably here in Germany, but also we make unfortunate progress here, because this is it comes very much like in terms of tribalist dynamics. So we are feeling part of a group and we do not question anything anymore. And so there's a lot of politics, a lot of question of identity today on very different forms and issues, and everything that is. And it's also what makes me like also thinking is that this also is not only in far-right context the case. So we have also different political actors that build more and more tribalistic ways of thinking. So I think it is a lot up to us as academics, and to also find ways of how to depolarize in certain contexts, even though it is very difficult. But I don't have the solution, but I just know that it is the core problem, I think, in our days, to have really informed ways of decision making, to reduce forms of emotionalized the political debate, because this is in the end, and the strongest emotions are those of fear and anger, and those are like very strongly pushed by the far right and left, and democratic actors will always stay behind, because their ethical boundaries. They're always and there should be boundaries in how far democratic actors could go, and there are none on paradox, because they also belong to a different ethical system in a way. And so I have no clue about how to solve this, but I acknowledge the depth of the crisis we are in.
Let's try again. Can you hear me now? Great.
Yes.
Well, I'd like to sum up the presentation of Maik in Portuguese, because I couldn't do before. Nós vimos 3 pontos principais aqui. Primeira, a mudança que a digitalização faz na organização da extrema-direita. Segundo, nós vimos que a extrema-direita não é um bloco único. Não dá para dizer que a extrema-direita seja só neonazistas. Há diferentes grupos com diferentes perspectivas, digamos assim, em como tomar o poder, e que às vezes colocam acentuam mais determinadas pautas do que outras, mas nós também vimos que a maior parte trabalha com várias ideologias, tem uma plataforma de ideologias de desigualdade, como a islamofobia, racismo, misoginia, né? E agora, voltando para a discussão, thank you very much for your questions, Bruna. And we have some questions in the chat. We are running out of time, but I hope you still can answer, Maik. The first question is about this increase on misogyny attacks. Are these attacks against women actually directed to Angela Merkel?
I mean, they have been for many years, as long as she has been chancellor. But what we see today is that so there is a big, like in our data set and in these misogynistic memes, we had a lot of politicians being attacked here. So normally we try to differentiate between attacks on politicians because it's not a protected group in a way. But in case that this has a clear misogynistic characteristic, we included them. And what we've seen is especially female politicians of the Green Party. So the Greens in Germany are, they are being scapegoat, or they are blamed for a lot of ills of social and political contexts. And we have especially 2 or 3 persons of the Green Party who are in the center of misogynistic memes. This is one politician, it's always, of course, intersectional in this context with fat phobia and green politician and a woman. So this comes together here, and also like the current foreign minister, who's a green representative, is very strongly being attacked here for lack of experience and unprofessionality. So this is something that we see very strongly. Angela Merkel much less, but she's not visible in German politics anymore. So, but before, she had been very hardly attacked for a pro-migration stance. And it's interesting that she's, I mean, not totally forgotten today, but it goes very quick in German politics that the meme subjects are going on and leave also like politicians like Merkel behind.
Thank you very much. Are you hearing me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. There is another question also regarding these attacks against women. Are they attacking more foreign women? And are you making this difference between online attacks to foreign and non-foreign women?
Difficult. I must check the data. So we had especially like the connect. It's difficult who is foreign and not foreign, of course. But I assume. I mean, most. Look, we checked like memes in the German-speaking far-right context, so most have a relation to German politics or everyday situations, and there are some also we've seen like this intersectionality between racism and misogyny in various contexts, but most of the memes are much more like in their stereotypical way that women are also represented as native, as white, and so they are much more targeted here, and there's fewer distinction if if a woman is foreign or not. So I think this is difficult to say, at least.
So another question, and then we have a last one. Only 2 questions now. Everybody is delighted with your presentation, and I have to say that Maik is famous for this, even in Germany. Everybody is delighted with Rage Against Machine. This is the publication of the project Maik Works, and Gorgone Araújo is asking, what kind of tools are you using to analyze the correlation between the data?
Yeah, good question. So we have our own we build our own monitoring system. So this is a lot of coding. I mean, I'm not the data scientist, I should say, but what we use is Python and R, so like coding languages for scraping and organizing the data, and for visualizing we use especially like a tool which is free. I don't want to make commercials, but you can also use it, which is Flourish. So this is a way of visualizing data, and then this is how we do it. But yeah, basically in the background, it's a lot of it's ways how to organize and visualize the data. I think in the background we have a lot of spreadsheets and tables, and there's just very few that we are going to present to the public, because it's so much data that it's difficult to or there's the danger of overloading. But I can also recommending on our website, Machine Against the Rage, we always have a methodology section. It's in German, unfortunately, but I'm sure it's easy to auto translate. We also explain every time how we get our data, how we proceed like to the publication.
Okay, now our last question from Guarin Liberato. Humor is also used by the left and the far left. What are the differences between the type of humor used by the left and left-wing extremists in comparison to the right-wing extremists?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. So I think basically, or what, like we also, the set of data that I presented to you was also just a little slice of the whole usage of memes. So these are the memes, the derogatory memes. So we had a lot of extremist memes, for example, which did not target minority groups, but still had, for example, references to National Socialism, of attacking politicians, for example. So these we excluded here. It was just also to see, like from a comparative view, which groups are being targeted, which protected minorities, which protected groups in a society, especially. And this is also, I think, part of the answer to the question that, left-wing, far-left memes and humor wouldn't go against these groups that I describe here. At least very few of them, I would suppose. So we would have much stronger visual discourse on political power, on power structures, I think on political representatives. So they are much more in the center of left-wing political memes. And I mean, we didn't check, or we didn't have like a comparison as we are monitoring, like especially the far right. But we also see that they are much less group-based hate in left-wing contexts, but much more directed to political representation and political structures. So this is, I think, a difference between both sides.
So thank you very much, Maik. Thank you very much for everybody that participated at this speech today. I'm very sorry for the technical problems we had. Thank you very much, Bruna, for your time and for your questions. And we are going to see each other next week with the presentation of Benjamin Kremer. Benjamin Kremer is professor at the University of Munich, the so-called LUMU Munich. And we are going to talk about fake news. Thank you very much, Maik.
All right, it was a pleasure. Thanks for your questions and also for the invitation. Next time I'm coming live to Brazil.
You are very welcome. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.